Improvisation is the refuge of the unprepared, Commander Zelrix of the Vrithian Strategic Command said at the joint briefing. He was looking directly at the human advisors when he said it. Captain Sara Okonkwo made no comment. She wrote nothing down. She simply looked at the tactical map. 3 weeks into the campaign, Zelrix's by-the-book offensive had stalled at Keth Ridge. Enemy forces had adapted. The textbook solution no longer applied. His computational strategists ran 12,000 simulations and returned the same answer. No pathway to victory. He called Okonkwo. She arrived with her team and reviewed the situation in silence. The tactical map displayed layered terrain data, unit positions, supply lines, and projected engagement zones. Enemy formations had settled into a defensive posture that exploited expected coalition behavior. Conventional approaches had already been attempted and countered. For 40 minutes, Okonkwo observed without interruption. She cross-referenced movement patterns, supply dependencies, and likely decision thresholds inferred from prior engagements. Her analysis did not rely on a single dominant variable, but on the relationships between multiple weak points, points that were not individually decisive, but collectively significant when combined under the right conditions. Zelrix stood nearby, waiting. His doctrine emphasized predictability, structure, and adherence to established strategic frameworks. His earlier offensive plan had been built on the assumption that the enemy would prioritize and defend specific assets according to standard military logic. That assumption no longer held. Okonkwo finally stepped forward. She began placing markers on the tactical display. Here, here, and here. She indicated 3 positions that did not align with the expected lines of engagement. Zelrix's attention sharpened. Not by the manual, Okonkwo said. The manual assumes they're defending what's valuable. But look, they're defending what they think will protect. So we don't protect it. She adjusted the markers, reorienting the focus of their projected movements away from the most obvious strategic points. Zelrix examined the positions. Abandoning that position means. It means it looks like a mistake, Okonkwo continued. Which means they think they see an opportunity. Which means they move here. Her finger traced a countervector along the map, projecting the enemy's likely response based on their established behavioral patterns. And that's when we closed the trap. Zelrix studied the sequence. The proposed maneuver deliberately created an apparent vulnerability. It inverted expectations, presenting a scenario where the enemy's adaptive logic would lead them into a controlled engagement zone rather than away from it. Your plan depends on inducing misinterpretation, Zelrix said. Okonkwo nodded. It depends on them being predictable when they think we are not. Zelrix reviewed the simulation outputs again, this time mentally substituting the proposed adjustments into the models. The outcomes were not identical to prior projections, but they introduced a new variable, opponent response under perceived advantage. Your method is not in any strategic doctrine, he said. No, Okonkwo replied. We made it up. She picked up her coffee and took a measured sip, as if the discussion had simply been another iteration of problem-solving rather than a deviation from established military practice. Then she looked at him. Do you want to win the campaign or follow the textbook? Zelrix remained silent. His doctrine had guided countless operations. It had been refined through repetition, validated through historical outcomes, and reinforced by institutional trust. But here, at Keth Ridge, those same principles had reached their limit. The simulations had already confirmed it. No standard pathway remained. The choice was not between right and wrong approaches. It was between adherence to a framework that no longer produced results, and the acceptance of an alternative that had not yet been codified but addressed the current reality more effectively. Zelrix looked at the map for a long time. He considered the proposed maneuver not as an exception, but as an adaptation to conditions outside the assumptions of existing doctrine. Finally, he made his decision. Execute it, he said. Orders were transmitted across the coalition forces. Units repositioned according to Okonkwo's plan. Movements that initially appeared counterintuitive began to unfold in coordinated phases. The enemy, observing what seemed like a deviation from expected coalition behavior, responded in line with their own adaptive logic. They interpreted the repositioning as a tactical error and adjusted their forces accordingly, shifting units into areas that appeared advantageous under that interpretation. That response aligned with Okonkwo's projection. Once the enemy committed, coalition forces executed the second phase of the plan, converging on the newly exposed vectors and isolating key segments of the opposing force. Engagements followed in rapid succession. Supply lines were disrupted. Command cohesion on the enemy side weakened as their formations were drawn into unfavorable positions. Without stable defensive anchors, their ability to maintain coordinated resistance diminished. Within 4 days, the campaign reached its conclusion. Coalition forces secured Keth Ridge and the surrounding strategic regions, effectively breaking the stalemate that had persisted for weeks. At the victory ceremony, Zelrix cited Okonkwo's strategy in his official after-action report. He detailed the sequence of decisions, the deviation from standard doctrine, and the resulting operational success. He added one editorial note which was entered into Vrithian Strategic Command Doctrine and remained there for 40 years. Improvisation is not the refuge of the unprepared. It is the weapon of the adaptable. Learn from the humans. The note was studied in training programs, referenced in strategic simulations, and incorporated into revised doctrine reviews across multiple commands. Not as a replacement for structured planning, but as a recognition that when conditions change beyond the scope of existing models, the ability to adapt in real time becomes a decisive factor. And in that campaign, adaptability had determined the outcome. Please follow my channel for more videos. One click from you can change my life.